and thank you for joining us on this intro episode of the Space for Humanity sponsored Universal Inclusion Podcast. We're going to be digging into details about how this podcast came to be, the impact that we hope it will have, and of course, about your host, me, Aisha. We're so fortunate to be joined today by Nadine Nicole. Nadine is an actress most known for her performance as Clarissa Mao on the renowned sci-fi hit The Expanse. Beyond acting, Nadine is passionate about social impact initiatives. She founded True Connection, a nonprofit dedicated to inspiring a deeper understanding of interconnectedness, and is also launching The Centered Self, a guide and journal to rewriting your life's narrative. A true creative, Nadine is also the founder of Yari Designs, a fine jewelry brand focused on promoting diversity and women empowerment. Hi, Nadine. Welcome to the podcast.
Aw, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be your first guest on this inaugural episode and share with people, about this podcast and how it's helping to bring about change in the space industry.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to join us, be our first guest. And I've known you for a little bit of time through Space for Humanity. You've been a longtime advisor, and you've even been on panels helping us choose who to send to space through the Citizen Astronaut Program.
Oh, which was so fun, so interesting and fascinating. And for our listeners who might not be familiar, Space for Humanity is a US-based nonprofit working hard to make sure that space is more accessible to everyone. They are most famous for their Citizen Astronaut Program, where everyday people who are making a real difference, they get the chance to go to space and then come back to the Earth to help create lasting change. And we'll dive a bit more into this program later in the episode.
And give some tidbits for folks looking to apply and go to space themselves.
So I'm going to reverse roles for a bit.
Okay.
So I want to know about you, and I'm going to take the interviewer seat. I want to know why you started this podcast. How did it come about? How did it come to be?
So I wear a couple of hats. The first hat I wear, I'm the founder and CEO of Universal Inclusion, but I'm also the director of programs at Space for Humanity. And that means that I lead selection and training for the Citizen Astronaut Program, as well as I lead the Inclusion Council at Space for Humanity. So the idea for this podcast really came about in my work in the Inclusion Council. Our meetings were filled with folks who are experts on inclusion and DEI in the space world, who were making change, and they were really great advisors, but it was a really small Zoom room. And I just always felt like I wish that more people heard these conversations. I wish that there was a community built around these conversations. And that's what got the wheels turning about making a podcast.
Yes, but you didn't get rid of the Inclusion Council, correct?
Right, exactly. In that moment, I knew there needed to be like a huge shift. And I believe in councils in certain spaces, in certain places. But at that time at Space for Humanity, it just didn't make sense. And we weren't making a lot of momentum for change, which is the whole point of all of this. So instead, we restructured. And now we've got projects. We've got 2 projects identified that we're working on for a full year. And so now Inclusion Council members are tied to projects. And the first project is related to an internal audit of the organization of the inclusion and accessibility. So that's going to be published at the end of the year, showing in what ways we are doing a great job in inclusion and in what ways we still need to make strides forward. And then the second project is sharing stories of inclusion in space via this podcast. Space for Humanity has been great because they really believe in this podcast and have sponsored my creation of this podcast via my company, Universal Inclusion.
I love your company. It's so needed in this world. And I'm so honored and thrilled to join the Inclusion Council at Space for Humanity and support the creation of this podcast, especially in this very wild and interesting time. I think storytelling and diversity, equity, inclusion is so important. Not only just from coming from the SEL world, but because it is literally what connects us to our shared humanity. And I think that it truly helps us understand ourselves and relate to others and the world around us better. It's through these kinds of stories that we can kind of make sense of our experiences, and communicate our values and inspire change. So I know it's a really powerful tool for connection and growth. So I'm very thankful that you're dedicated and committed to seeing all this through.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. It's just all about storytelling. As you alluded to, DEI is extremely politicized. It's being stripped away from so many places lately, and most recently, NASA. So, when I approach this, I don't at all see DEI as political. I see it very much a personal storytelling of realities that people are facing. So, I really see this podcast for two different types of folks. The first being those who face barriers and who can really find community and camaraderie in these stories and not feel alone as they navigate and face barriers within the industry. And then the second group of people, are people that don't believe in DEI, are pro, not having it in organizations, and maybe don't fully understand the breadth of all of it. I see this as a bit of an education tool as well. For folks that we're trying to educate, I don't want to just list statistics, stating how women represent only 30% of public space sector organizations, or how 53.4% of surveyed professionals have been victims of discrimination in the workplace. And as well, there aren't that many studies. But those that are there are really pointing that, yes, we need to do specific initiatives to support diversity. But instead, I just want our audience to listen to people who are sharing their stories and talking about the ways that the barriers have affected them, how they've navigated them. And I think that the qualitative data, the human experience, speaks to this issue so much more.
I truly did not feel like I understood who I was as a human on all of the layers and the wholeness of who I am until I left home, until I traveled the world in my teens and my 20s and my 30s, and I got to see myself in perspective from all these other humans, cultures, and places in the world. I got to look back at my little town in Michigan and my family and our bubble and how we grew up and our perspectives. And that's when I truly got to understand, oh, this is who I am. This is where I'm from. This is where this is what I've been taught. This is why I am who I am. And I got to understand it through the perspective of all these other perspectives, which made it more true and real and authentic in a way. I know it's kind of abstract and hard to understand, but would you say for those communities facing barriers, is this podcast a bit of a roadmap of that education on how to get there, how to get those new perspectives and understand it from a broader perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. For people from communities facing barriers, this is not something that happens from the ages of 5 to 15. This is your whole life. And so there will be moments where you're really digesting moments of maybe systemic racism or bias, or microaggressions. And it's through other people's stories that you're like, oh, aha, that that was not a normal conversation. That was not right. Um, Now, how do I process this? And that's something that a lot of folks are always kind of looking at and dealing with, and that can come up at any point in time, at the beginning of someone's career, later on down the road they might reflect. And I also want to say that there are times that folks might not have come across barriers or systemic injustice, even though they come from communities that have historically faced them. So every experience is totally different. I think that the main thing that I want folks to take away from this is that we're a global community that needs to support one another, regardless of our experience, right? If you had a little bit or a lot of discrimination or none, It doesn't matter. It is that there is a large part of the community that is and has. And how can we look at that? How can we support that? How can we learn from it so that it doesn't happen in the future?
Yeah. And the next frontier of humanity, the future, is space, right? It's like that opportunity to push beyond what we know and innovate in ways that we can't imagine yet. There's so many different reasons, not just for the present time of learning how to better take care of our planet and our plants and humans and each other and see us as one living species, um, but also, what's going to happen for the future of humanity. So I don't know, to really shape that in its most productive and efficient way, we need to have all voices at the table and represented. That's just how it works. Inclusivity and diversity in space is vital because we need all of the perspectives to fuel the creativity and problem solving that's needed. So without diverse contributions, we risk limiting the potential of space exploration, and all of the discoveries it promises. As a woman of color and an artist, I've seen firsthand how underrepresentation plays out. I mean, particularly in film and TV, Asians are cast in stereotypes. I was having this conversation with an executive producer at Sony last night. It's like, so are there many roles out there for you? And I was like, yeah, I mean, right now is really slow and it's a challenging time as an actress. But, when it comes to casting Asian, they want Korean or Japanese or Chinese now. There's not a whole lot out there for Filipinos or mixed Filipinos in storytelling unless the character breakdown is mixed or ethnically ambiguous. So it's just interesting how it kind of plays out, how we kind of see people, and when they need to have the Asian assistant at the lawyer firm or whatever, how they really want to go full Chinese or full, it's like it's confusing to people. They don't know what to do with me as a mixed person. They don't know how to label me or where to put me in, and they want to play on the stereotypes because that's how we learn right now. And until we bring in broader perspectives of how everything works and mixed American lives, it's, the more diversity, the more voices and we see and hear and understand, the more depth and authenticity we can bring to the table. So it's really important to tell all the stories of humanity, everyone. And this is why it's important in space. So we don't make these same kinds of mistakes moving forward. And DEI in space, just like the media, ensures that every individual, regardless of background, has the chance to contribute. So it's, you know, it's going to make humanity's future much more impactful and equitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last thing that I want to see is that, we're spacefaring. We've got organizations and companies in space, and then it's like this huge, uh-oh, we're not representing all of mankind. Uh-oh, there's a huge imbalance. So it makes sense to address this now at the beginning of this industry's launch into space. And representation is so important in every single industry. And it is a real indicator for young people. If I don't see myself, am I allowed to be in that space? Is it safe to be in that space? And I think folks that see themselves all the time, they never think that that's something that's coming across someone's mind as they're making these career decisions. I I really think, it's important to see ourselves in astronauts, but just as importantly, it's important to see ourselves in absolutely every sector and as it's growing in the space industry. I was having a conversation with someone at the very kind of beginning of their career. And they're like, I want to speak to young people, but I haven't done anything yet. I haven't gone to NASA. I haven't had an internship yet. And I haven't even I'm so far from going to space if I ever will. And I was like, oh, no, you've got an itch to inspire young people. Now's the time. I want I don't want there to be this, okay, once I've reached the pinnacle, the top of the top, then I can be a representation. No, like we need to showcase and hear voices of diversity at every part of people's career and in lots of different career choices in industry. And so that's something that I really looked at in this podcast. We did a we did a lot of digging to find some voices and perspectives that might not have even thought that they would be on a podcast at all. And I'm like, yeah, I want you to tell your story. I want you to share how you got to where you are, even if in your mind this isn't where you want to be talking. You're not at that tippity top level.
That makes so much sense to me right now. I'm kind of having like an epiphany. And to share, yeah, the stepping stones along the way, because I have the same thing. I'm like, oh, we can share these stories when we're at the top. Like that's when people will listen. That's when you'll have the platform. But it makes sense that if you can find ways to inspire now is the time for sure. But you're right, it works in subconscious ways because if we don't see ourselves there, you have to have a very unique, rebellious spirit to think, oh, well, if I'm a Asian girl to be like, I'm going to be president or I'm going to be an astronaut. And we can have those things, but if you don't see them in place, it's a subconscious thing that you're more likely going to consciously choose things where you see yourself, right? As
Mhm.
I'm going to be a mother, I'm gonna do things that I see women doing. It's just like a natural way of going about it. But I'm curious, um, what got you interested in DEI in the first place? Like, what led you down this path?
Okay, well, it's been a long road. Let's just say that. But the wheels started turning really early in terms of um, equity. So I'm first generation Canadian on my father's side. I'm Somali, and my mom is English and German. And being biracial in and of itself is interesting to navigate, right? Sometimes you're too much of this, not enough of that, and your identity is kind of in a bit of a flux. But on top of that, I had the really unique experience of being raised in northern Alberta, Canada, in a predominantly Indigenous community. So, the story behind that, my mom fell in love with the North in her early 20s, had lived up there, and came back down to southern Alberta and then to the capital city, got married, had me, and then returned back as a single mom. And so I grew up in this really unique community that at the time, like, okay, don't want to date myself too much here, but like the VCR was brand new. So we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all of these connections to the outside world. But what I was navigating as a biracial person in that community um, was, there was this huge oil and gas boom that brought in a lot of new people from other parts of Canada. And there had already, historically been a lot of just horrific things done to the Indigenous people in the North. And there was bias built into the system in the North. But then on top of that, adding thousands of people to work and kind of given this like golden key to privilege for apparently no real reason. As a kid, you're like, why? Why on one hand, there's a group that has so much discrimination and bias and like disadvantage, and another group just coming in and kind of getting the key to the city. And so that really got the wheels turning as a kid. But I didn't put my finger on DEI or really understand it at that point. So we ended up actually moving to southern Alberta for my education. My mom was originally from southern Alberta, and she was worried. She sat me down and was like, "You're failing everything in school," and I was like, "Okay." Like I had no buy-in to school. It wasn't important to me, and because of the history of residential schools in the area, um, the community didn't have buy in, understandably so, and had a lot of suspicion to education. And even at that time, it was riddled with like, a lot of um, a lot of different hands and perspectives in the school, a lot of religious overtones and hands still in the school. Um, so it wasn't necessarily an unbiased place to learn about the world and have opportunity given to you. So I the days I went. Did I participate? No. The buy-in wasn't there at all. And so my mom moved us to southern Alberta for my education. And then, it took a long time to acclimatize. But again, as a kid, you're like, what is this? Why does this community now have this opportunity and this like pretty direct path to university? And people who are now really invigorated and motivated to get me across that line, whereas that like didn't happen before and really made my wheels turn again about inequality. So, I started taking a degree in international development studies. That led me down the path to really being curious about curriculum, how different curriculum sets you up for success. And yeah, I started down the path to becoming an educator.
I love hearing all of that. Your path has literally set the stage for you to deeply understand DEI and share it into the world. Um, yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of background, like you're talking about, and work to make this teaching of education look effortless.
So, even then in education, I was interested in curriculum, but I didn't necessarily understand DEI or inclusion. I decided to take a route in social studies because I, at that point, had traveled a fair bit. And I loved, who doesn't love a globe? Who doesn't love a map? So I thought social studies, that's it, it'll be fun. And I got 2 weeks into the program and I was like, oh my God, I'm so bored. This is horrific. I'm the kind of person that I need a complicated problem at all times to feel happy. Like I need like a huge, like, how are we going to solve this problem? And so someone said, oh, you need to go into inclusive education. It is like the hardest stream there is. They're talking about neuroscience and they're learning about,
Yeah.
cognitive variance. They're talking about linguistic variance, physical variance, all of the different ways that we need to support everyone to find success in the classroom. And so I landed there and I loved it. I was like, oh, this is really hard. Because in my opinion, inclusion should be seamless. It should be baked in. No kid should ever feel like, oh, let's get out that alternative quiz because she's here. Like, no. Or, oh, let's put the ramp in. Okay. Like, it should be baked in. Educators should understand how to teach to absolutely everyone in the room and everyone have fun while they're doing it.
Yeah, that would be the ideal world to live in. I love children and I've worked a lot with them with our nonprofit, and it's so enlightening. Like you said, you can't just get away with anything with children. Like you, when you were younger, you asked all the questions. You're like, but why? But why? Who made up these rules? Why is this happening? And I love that that's kind of the lens that children can see with. They haven't been, just filled with all of must these belief systems that we just take for granted now. And so, yeah, it's so rewarding to work with children, and it makes sense why you're so passionate about inclusion now. Um, but space, I know how I accidentally got here, and which has been so wonderful and such an eye-opening journey. How did you get tied into space?
Yeah. So I ended up leaving education rather abruptly because of COVID. Uh, and, but I had been kind of toying with the idea of leaving the education world for a while, which is a whole other story. But I thought, okay, what can I do? So I ended up leaving the education world rather abruptly because of COVID. And then I ended up in a startup and I was working my way in that company, kind of trying to find the right fit. And I had heard that educators do a really good job in human resources. And in this company that was, all the best and the worst of a startup, I pitched to them. I said, hey, I have no background in HR, but what I have a background in is making sure everyone feels safe, comfortable, and is achieving success. So let me take everything that I know about making little kids like love coming to school into the business world. And if I don't do a great job, I will fire myself. So they were like, okay, we have nothing to lose. We don't have anyone in that position. And also, I was like, you can pay me the same, so it's fine. And I began learning about human resources. I saw it as such like a gatekeepery place. I still do recruiting on the side. I love to do recruiting because, it just takes a few extra steps, like definitely more time, but it's not hard to do an inclusive recruiting cycle that now everyone has an opportunity and a shot. And I just feel so passionately as well that all of the supports that kids need, adults need as well. Nothing, the
Mhm.
mind doesn't just suddenly change or the body change or, all of these different things in the equation change when you get that, university degree and step into the corporate world. So yeah, I was working in corporate, and then the CEO of the company I was working at loved Space for Humanity. And instead of a donation, he donated me because they needed some HR support. So I had no idea what I was getting involved in. I was already working like crazy hours. And so I actually was like doing the HR for Space for Humanity on the weekends because I was like, you know what? I'll go for it. It's fine. It's like part of the job. Which was, a
A
huge
challenge that
amount.
you love so much.
Oh, corporate, you're like, "Oh, what's 50 hours a week? It's fine. What's seeing your family? It's totally fine." So, yeah, that's really why I initially fell in love with Space for Humanity. I was like, everyone is so fun, so sweet, so supportive. The executive director at the time, Rachel Lyons, was just so great to work with. And they needed someone to help them make a process for finding someone to send to space via the Citizen Astronaut Program. And they had thousands of applicants. So I broke it down and I said, okay, well, what about if you did it like XYZ, like, unbiased selection that we would do kind of in education? And that's what kind of got me, down the road. But I don't think it clicked. I don't think it still clicked the importance of space.
Yeah, you went from education to corporate, and then you got donated into HR in space. And it's hard to really understand. I didn't really get it until Space for Humanity as well opened my eyes to what is possible here, like the potential of flying Katya to space, having her come back and start changing the world on fire within weeks. Talking to the president of Mexico and all that she changed in STEM for women across the globe. Right initially, I was like, oh, okay, so this is the potential of what space has, and what it can do here on Earth for sustainability, what we learn from people being in little pods in space on their own, having to sustain life on their own. So, what changed for you? When did you get it? Like, what clicked?
I hate to admit, I was 2 feet into Space for Humanity starting the selection, and I still thought that space was for rich white men, as a lot of places in this world are. It didn't really click the importance until now. I created the selection of the Citizen Astronaut Program, but I don't actually mark. So it's done. We create this rubric that we look at different criteria. And then we have teachers, we train them on unbiased selection, and they use the rubric to go about it. Da da da. But what I do is I read applications because I am curious, what's going on? Why do thousands of people want to go to space? Are they not scared? Like, and my mind too, it was still like scary to venture out to. Um, and it clicked reading the applications. Truly, it was like chicken soup for the soul. Okay. I just kept hearing so much that resonated with me, so much, regarding people saying, I'm the only one in the room and I had to fight so hard to get here. And there's this, that, the other, and all kinds of things related to DEI and inclusion. And what really came out through thousands of applications was this commonality of Okay, opportunities are far and few between. And there is still a lot of bias and rigid ways to select people, to hire people within the industry. And it is really tough if you, on top of all of that, have a passport from somewhere that you can't even apply to the few opportunities that there are in terms of scholarships or fellowships. So that really, for me, led to this calling of like, okay, if I connect all of these things together, um, I can I can help this group of people because yeah, is actually extremely important.
It is really important. I mean, it is poised to be $1 trillion industry.
It's not just about folks who are thinking about the stars from a sci-fi standpoint. It is an industry that is poised to be huge and it's happening right now. So we want as many people at the table helping to craft and shape what it's going to look like. But I'm interested, Nadine, how did you talking about sci-fi? I mean, is that how you got interested? Was it through your role in the Expanse? How did you get into the space industry?
It was through The Expanse. And I am so grateful for that show because of its introduction into this community. Obviously, The Expanse was fantastic to work on. My favorite project thus far, an incredible role to dive into, and just brilliant writers to work with. I mean, we were surrounded by NASA minds and astronauts and consultants all within this world. There was constantly JPL people at all the events we were at. So yeah, I'm really grateful for them introducing me to this community. But I would say, my first initial sparks of interest were when I would just gaze at the stars. When I moved out to California and would go to Joshua Tree, 3 times in the summer and go camping and just stay up all night looking at the stars with friends. It was one of my favorite things to do for a decade. I was just out there all the time stargazing. Um, and so when I would travel a lot and go to different places in the world, I would just find the most brilliant skies that would just create so much awe in me and passion of, like those questions, those important philosophical questions of like, why are we here? And how small are we? And how long is are humans going to last? We're this tiny little blip in time and space. So I just love those questions. It makes you feel really connected to the bigger picture of life. And Space for Humanity, the community here is also of that heartbeat and that mindset. So I just feel like I've found kindred spirits that would have not been introduced to me if it were not for the Expanse. So it's a journey right now that keeps unfolding with Space for Humanity, and I'm really excited to see what comes next.
It's so interesting. And yeah, looking up at the stars, that is universal. That is, multi generational. That has been going on since the beginning of time. Every culture has history with the stars and traditions surrounding it. So, I think it is a bit of a full circle moment as now we're looking at the reality of okay, we can start looking at um, doing more missions outside of Earth, more industry being built, and such an important time that, I hope as well on this podcast, people who have no like space background, no science background, um, and who maybe don't want to end up in the space industry, I hope that they find themselves to this podcast as well because I truly think that space is the commons, it's everybody's. And so I hope that everyone can be at the, metaphorical table making decisions about space because in my mind it belongs to everyone.
And that's why I truly advocate for, and I'm so excited to be a part of Space for Humanity and support the mission because ensuring everyone gets a seat at the table in the world and in our future and in this space sector is truly important. You know, otherwise we're just going to keep repeating these same injustices over and over. And so by offering these transformative space experiences to purpose driven leaders, I mean, we're working to ensure the future of space exploration prioritizes social justice, and is shared by everyone. And that is a worthy dream and cause. Uh, you know, I'm really happy to be on this problem solving road with you. You got all my support. We're not shying away from it, you know. So I think the main question that everyone here listening probably wants to know is, how can they go to space?
So, Space for Humanity was the first fully sponsored way to get to space through the Citizen Astronaut Program. I can't stress enough that it is for everyone and anyone, any background, country of origin, residence, passport. We aren't looking at ticking off boxes of diversity. We just actually happen to have found two citizen astronauts from countries that had never flown before. So I want to be really clear that we're looking at the aspects of leadership, community development, and impact, because we want folks who are committed to creating change in the world. Because after they go up and have this mind blowing experience of the overview effect and seeing the earth from a different perspective, you know, we know that it fosters in folks this like I can do anything mentality. And so we want people who are already poised to create change to then come back, and we support them on a year-long mission to create change in the world. Now it can look like anything, absolutely anything. And I don't want people to think, oh, I don't have a background in STEAM and STEM, because it doesn't have to be that. Having, change in the world can look so different. I don't even want to give examples because I don't want people to even like look to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think, the real beacon is the leadership, community development, and impact. And so that's what folks need to be focusing on.
Space shouldn't be just for the privileged. Like we've been saying, it should be an opportunity for all of us. And just seeing, you know, all of these Citizen Astronaut Program women and men come back now and what they've been doing, it just blows my mind and heart wide open. It's incredible to witness. So, everyone listening, go follow these people, see their journeys. It's the most inspiring thing in the world. It does make you feel like you can do anything. And that once you have a purpose, if you have the right platform, you can be a huge impact in this world just by following your heart and your dreams, and solving our most pressing issues today. So, I guess another question for everyone listening here is, how can someone get a leg up on their application?
Yeah. You know what? We can really sniff out if it's authentic. And so I feel like a lot of times academia has set us up for this, like, okay, the same mentality of like, how do I apply to Harvard or MIT of the world? I've got to have like a really big list of accomplishments and like extracurriculars and languages and this and that. And so when we tell people to do impact, they're like, okay, I'm going to do absolutely everything and brrr. And it's not how long the list is. It is what you're doing related to impact? Is it coming from a place of authenticity? Like, do you really want to be there? Are you really driven to be there? Is there passion to be there? Is there like this fire in the belly? And if you need to go on a search to find that fire, that is okay. I would rather someone have a shorter time doing something that they are so passionate and driven from a really authentic place than someone that has been doing work since like kindergarten, if that makes sense.
It does. It's all about the why, right?
Mhm.
That's what brings the passion and the longevity, which it takes a lot of endurance and grit, right? To keep trucking on those journeys. So that makes sense. You know, how special would it be for these people that were flying to space to spread their wings and do the impact, and all the work in their lives?
I do have a tip though. Um, when you are doing the impact, there's going to come a point where we're going to sit down and say, okay, who can I call to background check this and to, validate that XYZ happened? So I would suggest for people to create a log, maybe a journal of their activities and what they're doing, especially if they're working with vulnerable populations. In the past, we've done workshops about using blogging and social media to showcase what you're doing. But in instances like if you're working with kids, then you've got to really, be careful with how you're putting that out there in the world. And I would rather sit down with someone as we're kind of opening the book of the impact they've done, and I can call and maybe a supervisor in that school to talk about what they did rather than like seeing it blasted online, because with vulnerable populations it's really important um, that a lot of this work it's just between you and them or you and a small group, and we understand that as we're looking at your applications at Space for Humanity.
So if any of you out there end up doing an impact journal, let us know, put it in your application. And yeah, I'm really excited to hear about the upcoming podcasts and listen to them when they come out. Thank you so much for bringing me on and letting me be a part of this and sharing what inspired you to start this and what it's all about. I'm so excited to see it go out in the world and who's going to listen and how it's going to impact.
Thank you so much for all of the support that you've been giving and continue to give to not just this, but other causes as well. I'm excited to see this podcast launch. Our next guest is none other than Citizen Astronaut number one, the first Mexican born woman to fly to space, the amazing Katia Ekezareta. So make sure that you're following so you can tune into that episode. Thank you so much, and bye bye for now.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Universal Inclusion Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how to get involved in the space industry, follow us on Instagram and TikTok at universal_inclusion. Our passion is amplifying voices in STEAM and STEM and the space industry. If you'd like to be a guest, shoot us a DM. Until next time, ad Astra.